Hey there everybody, Mazrock here, and today we're going to be doing a beginner's guide to Evoker. What we are going to be covering here specifically is the class section of the talent tree. I have been playing Augmentation a bit on PTR, I've been playing Devastation and Preservation on live for a little while now, and I'm having a lot of fun with it and finding all of the little nicks and knacks and useful things that you can do and all the little nuances with the specs themselves has been really interesting for me, and I see a lot of people coming into my stream going, what? Evokers can do that? Some of this stuff is going to be pretty common knowledge, basic if you don't know it, but that's what this is. This is a beginner's guide, right? So this is all we're going to be going. We're going to be talking about what some of the basics things do. Before we do get into it though, please do like, comment, and subscribe. It goes such a long way towards helping out the channel. If you want to see me cover more Evoker things, let me know down in the comments section down below, because I do plan on playing Augmentation a lot in the 10.1.5 patch coming up. It looks insanely fun, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be covering this a little bit more. But let me know what you guys think down below. There is a Twitch link, Discord link. So come on by, watch me stream, come on hang a wonderful community full of great people. There is a Patreon link as well. This is actually an early access video for them. So if this is something that interests you, getting early access stuff, exclusive stuff as well on Patreon. I don't always put every video that there are some videos that I just never post live on YouTube that they get early access to. And merch. I've got merch. Blood Decay. I only do Dungeons Fully Erect. Lots of good stuff like that. All right, so Evoker. Now, Evoker in 10.1.5, which is what we're going to be covering here. So here I am on the PTR with no points put in. There are some minor changes coming to the class tree itself. So I want to be doing this on the most relevant and, updated guide, because on July 11th, depending, that's the time it's coming, depending on when you're watching this, if it's before or after that date, 10.1.5 may be alive. So Evoker spells can be categorized pretty much into a few different brands. You have blue spells, red spells, and black spells, as well as green spells. So red spells, mostly fire related. Blue spells, arcane, like Disintegrate. Black spells, you have stuff like Ebb and Might, which is going to be reserved pretty much exclusively for Augment Evoker. And then of course your green spells, which are more healing oriented, right? You have your, your Poison Dispel, you have Emerald Bloom, Verdant, things like that. Lastly, we have bronze spells, which are your timey-wimey bronze Dragonflight, that they're all about time with that one, and time manipulation. So those are all of the color spells that you're going to be working with as an Evoker. So when we do go into this and we're talking about the color of spells, that is the generalization of what we mean by them. So as we go down the class tree, we're just going to do this in capstone areas. So we're going to go down and we're going to be talking about these talents here, then here, then here, if you're looking at the screen, and breaking them down a little bit. So Landslide is a black spell. Now this is something everyone can get access to, where what it does is it clears a nice path and it roots the enemies. Baseline, 1.5 minute cooldown, but with Forger of the Mountains, you can actually reduce this cooldown by 30 seconds, making it 1 minute, and withstand more damage before breaking. Now, this is something in Mythic Plus I have found to be actually incredibly useful at times. There are times where just rooting things, aka Brackenhide Hollow, when things start running away, throwing out a Landslide and keeping everything in place for just those few extra seconds, can be a really big help. And Landslide with Augmentation Evoker is going to be able to get a stun component to it as well, but that's not something we're going to cover specifically in this one, more in the Evoker video, but understand that is something that is going to be at your disposal a little bit later on. And then of course you have Obsidian Scales. This is a, you reinforce your scales, you gain a 30% DR. It has a 1.5 minute cooldown and lasts for 14 seconds. Now, lasts for around 14 seconds. Basically, it's your defensive, right? Expunge. Now, this baseline is a Poison Dispel. So, when you're going to need it, depending from time to time, it is at the top of the tree. It's an easy point to go in and grab. And, of course, this is incredibly useful with the new Afflicted affix. Right below a landslide, we have natural convergence, which disintegrate channels 20% faster, and eruptions cast time is reduced by 20%. So with augmentation, we are getting a new ability called Eruption, which is going to actually replace the blue spell of Disintegrate. Disintegrate is the single target blue beam that comes out of your mouth that has a channel time. Eruption's a little bit differently, doesn't channel, it's just a cast time before damage occurs. Easy point to have there. Innate magic, your essence regenerates 5% faster. So what your essence is if we go over here, now again, this is my PTR setup, so it's not quite the way that I have it on my live, is you have these little essences. Now this is your resource. You have mana, but you also do have essence as a resource, and things cost essence, right? So this ability just makes your essence generate a little bit faster. Below Obsidian Scales, we do have Permeating Chill. So the damage of your blue spells. So this is something like Disintegrate. And it reduces the target's movement by 50% for 3 seconds when you do use that. So this is Azure Strike. This is Disintegrate. Things like that, right? Verdant Embrace. So you fly to an ally and you heal them or yourself for the same amount. Verdant Embrace is actually a really strong, it's a pretty good heal, but it does have a nice damaging component to it as well. But this is also a nice movement ability. So this has a 25-yard range, like most Evoker spells do, right? Is a 25-yard range. And you fly to that ally. Let's say you are in trouble, you are in a frontal, and you need a quick out. You can Verdant Embrace an ally that is currently in safety and fly out. And there is a little bit of a travel time to here, but it is much faster than just walking. And you gain a heal. Now there is a healing component to this as well for Preservation Evoker, which you do create a life bond, but that's a thing for an Evoker video, for a Preservation Evoker video. But there is a little bit more to it. Right? Under Verdant Embrace, you have Scarlet Adaptation. You store 20% of your effective healing up to X amount. Your next damaging Living Flame consumes all stored healing to increase its damage dealt. So basically you store some healing up to a certain amount, your Living Flame does more damage, right? Not too bad at all. Then we have things like Enkindling, which Living Flame deals more damage. Now, Living Flame is an ability right here, which costs 30,000 mana. But you get 85%, if I'm not mistaken, 85%-ish of that mana back when that hits an enemy. Now, the reason why they do this is actually so you can't just spam heal allies. In 10.1.5, Blizzard is doing a big push to try and reduce the amount of off-healing that DPS and tank specs do. So that's what it is, right? So if you're going to be spamming your allies with Living Flame as a DPS spec, you're going to quickly run out of mana, but you get a lot of that back just by doing damage. So don't necessarily look at the cost and think, whoa, I only have 260k mana here, and this costs 30,000 mana per bolt. What's going to happen? Hit enemies, you get a lot of that back. Right? Plain and simple. Quell is your interrupt. It has a baseline of a 40-second cooldown, but there are means of reducing it for devastation and augmentation. So if we go over to this side here, you can reduce it down to a 20-second cooldown, which puts it more in line with your ranged DPS. But 20 seconds is a little bit less than your ranged DPS because you're kind of that middle class, right? Again, everything revolves around that 25 yards for Evoker. Now, we're not going to be building a tree here that you want to be looking at. I am going to be talking about a lot of very good points that you want to go in, but this is not going to be the tree that you're going to be, we're talking about the spec itself, so we're going to be putting points and things just to go down. Now, wing beats, heavy wing beats, and clobbering sweep. So tail swipe and wing buffets cooldown are both reduced by 45 seconds, depending on whatever you want on that note. Now, those are actually your racial abilities, and these are two pretty good racial abilities. So tail swipe, both have a 1.5 minute base cooldown, so this is you lash out your tail with tail swipe, and you knock enemies 8 yards into the air, which is a really good AoE stop. And then wing buffet, kind of does the same thing, except pushes enemies away from you. So this is, wing buffet's really good for things like Sanguine, like, hey, you're casting in Sanguine, get out of there. We don't want you in that, right? And tail swipe is a really, really good AoE stop that just, knocks everyone up, gets you a few seconds of breathing room along the way, but you can actually reduce the cooldown of those racials right in the class tree itself. Really, really nice. Next, we're going to talk about Cauterizing Flame. This is an ability that I see so many people underutilize or don't utilize enough. This is a 1-minute dispel of any ally's wounds, removes all poisons, curses, and disease effects, which is great, but it also removes all bleed effects. This is absolutely astoundingly huge, especially with the amount of bleeds in this dungeon pool. Halls of Infusion, Alderman, Neltharis, Brackenhide Hollow all have prominent bleeds in them that can stack up very, very quickly or hit very, very hard that you can just straight up dispel. The Sentinel boss in Alderman puts out a bleed and you can pretty much handle every second one on your own. Second to third, depending on how the fight's going. I've noticed it depends. I don't know if it's weird spell queuing depending on when the stun occurs, but usually most of the time it's like every 2 or 3. I mean, you can hit every 2 bleeds on the Chains boss in Neltharis. That's a 15-second heavy bleed that you can just straight up be like, you don't have that anymore. This is huge. Not to mention the fact that this adds a second dispel for afflicted weeks. So there are some times where you can just quite literally handle both afflicted mobs and let your healer do healing or damage or whatever else and add that support. I am viewing this very much from a support class as well because I do plan on playing a lot of augmentation, right? That's kind of where my goal is and where I'm having a lot more excitement about the spec and why I even wanted to level it up. So, recall, you may activate your deep breath after 3 seconds, landing back to travel back in time, back at your location. Now, what deep breath is, this is one of your baseline abilities. You go forward in a line and you deep breath. And you deal a lot of damage to this. This becomes Breath of Aeons in Augmentation spec. But this is a very good damaging ability that can get you in trouble from time to time, so do watch out with that. A bad deep breath when you get, because you can still take damage while you're deep breathing, you really want to plan this accordingly and not land in a bunch of frontals. Right? But there are ways for you to get back to position if you want to play recall with that. Tip the Scales is a bronze spell on a 2-minute cooldown that compresses time to make your next Empower spell cast instantly and at its max Empower level. Now, Evokers have a unique mechanic called Empowering Spells. Baseline, all 3 specs get Fire Breath, so we'll talk about that one in particular, but there's also Eternity Surge, Spirit Bloom, Upheaval as well for augmentation. Each spec has another additional Empower spell that they can kind of add on to it. But for Fire Breath, so let's just go into the spell book here and talk about Fire Breath real quick. So if we look at Fire Breath, it has a 30-second cooldown, and currently it does have 3 ranks. There are ways to add more ranks onto that Empower spell with different talents and different trees, but we're going to be talking specifically baseline version right here, right now. And as you can see at rank 1, it deals a smaller amount of damage up front and then leaves a bigger dot over a longer period of time as its kind of reward for rank 1. For rank 2, it deals a little bit more damage up front. The dot gets reduced down to 18 seconds from 24 and deals a little bit less damage. And of course, rank 3 is a lot more upfront damage and the dot is only 12 seconds long. So depending on how you're playing, how long the pack's going to live, and that sort of thing, you're going to want to work the different levels of empowered spells into your rotation, which I think has actually been a lot of fun. Now, there are nodes to increase your magic damage. Of course, like increase your magic damage, reduce the amount of damage you take. There is the stamina node. Now, this used to be a 2-point node, is now a 1-point node, which is really, really nice. And you do have things like Attune to the Dream, so increases your healing done and healing received. Sleepwalk is a very good ability for Incorporeal. Now, I know this is pretty good in PvP, but this is a PvE-oriented guide. So with Sleepwalk, you disorient an enemy for 20 seconds. This literally full cast deals with an Incorporeal every single time. 15-second cooldown, lasts for 20 seconds. You cast this on an Incorporeal, you're fine. But you're not going to need this in most dungeons this season, although this is really good in Halls of Infusion on the last boss, where they all have the Infused cast, which you can just put them to Sleepwalk, and then that way you've dealt with that one cast while you go through and you deal with the others. So that is a potential good use if you're trying to kind of min-max some of your abilities. Bountiful Bloom. So Emerald Bloom heals an additional 2 allies. Now, what Emerald Bloom is, it is this nice kind of green circle of healing, which provides a nice little bit of off healing along the way. And as well, Ancient Flame. Now, this is actually a really powerful ability. So casting Emerald Blossom or Verdant Embrace reduces the cast time of your next Living Flame cast by 40%. So if you're trying to get a little bit more damage in and you got some quick movement, and you know you need some healing, you can cast a Verdant Embrace and then know that you can fire off a much quicker Living Flame than what you may be normally casting. Really, really nice to see there. We have Source of Magic. Now, Source of Magic. Now, this is a 30-minute blue buff. You redirect your excess magic to a friendly healer for X amount of time, and when you cast an Empower spell, you restore some of their maximum mana per Empower level, which is actually kind of nice. This is a lot better in Raid, but I do see, like, you know, if I'm playing with a healer spec that I know eats a lot of mana on really healing-intensive weeks, I run Source of Magic to help them out, and it just, you know, every time that your healer doesn't have to drink and you get to keep pulling, usually means the dungeon run's going a lot quicker and a lot smoother. This is all about, you know, in my head, it's all about being a support role as much as possible because I like playing Augmentation. Hover lasts 4 seconds longer, so with Extended Flight. Now, what Hover is this nice quick movement ability that you get to shoot up and fly around and kind of cast on the move. Now, this does not work with Empower spells, but casts with things like Living Flame, Disintegrate, and that sort of thing along your way. There are talents to increase your Fire Breath. So, for example, Fire Breath's damage over time lasts for 4 seconds longer. Really, really nice to see. Then we start getting into the capstone era of things where you have abilities like Rescue. So this is where you can swoop in and fly an ally and bring them to the target location. So this, you grab an ally and you bring them up ahead. This is really good for making Blood Death Knights and Protection Paladins move a little bit faster in Dungeon Run. This also can help people get through weird little skips or things like that along your way. This is, you know, not a bad ability, but it's not the best ability in the world. Of course, we have Potent Mana as well. So Source of Magic increases the target's healing and damage done by 3%. So this now becomes in 10.1.5 a really nice healer buff, which is something I'm going to be excited to be using for on my healers, increasing their healing and damage done by 3%. 3%, it seems like a small number, but in the end, it really, really does add up. Unravel is another unique spell that's really, really nice. 9-second cooldown, which you sunder an enemy's protective magic, dealing spell frost damage to absorb shields. Now, there are a few instances where there are some absorb shields, like, for example, Nothar's has a couple, which you can just do good instant damage, usually getting 1 or 2 of these off, depending on kind of how slow your teammates are, you know, bursting down that shield so you can kick that Molten Army cast and things like that. Again, this is not something that's useful in every single dungeon, but has a lot of unique uses along the way. So think about this one when you're kind of going forward and moving in. You have Leaping Flames, which makes your Living Flame strike an additional target per Empower level. Fire Breath causes your next Living Flame to... Sorry. Fire Breath... My bad. Leaping Flames. Fire Breath causes your next Living Flame to strike 1 additional target per Empower level. So if you went with a rank 3 Fire Breath, and then you hit Living Flame, you're hitting a lot of people with that, which is really, really nice. And Terror of the Skies. Deep Breath stuns enemies for 3 seconds. This is that 2-minute ability that we talked about earlier. You get 2 stacks of Hover. Next, we're going to talk about a Pressing Roar. Now, this with Overawe. We're going to talk about both simultaneously here. So, on a 2-minute cooldown, you can let out a bone-shaking roar at enemies in a cone in front of you, increasing the duration of crowd control effects that affects them by 50%, which lasts for 10 seconds. So, this is going to increase how potent the CC that all of you and your teammates do against these targets along the way, which is incredibly nice and pretty good to have here. Although on its own is a little lackluster unless you are absolutely relying on very specific CC timings. You get to make that easier with a Pressing Roar. But Overawe is really what makes this a defining talent on Raging Week. So Pressing Roar removes 1 enrage effect from each enemy, and its cooldown is reduced by 20%. 20 seconds for each enraged dispelled. You can quite literally just wait until all the mobs are down and they're all enraged and you get just AoE soothe. Not a problem. You are the only spec in the game that can do this. So take this on Raging Week. You are going to be saving your healers and your tanks a lot of headache with this awesome combination here. So here we have with Panacea. You have buffs to Emerald Blossom, and then we come down to Renewing Blaze. Renewing Blaze with Foci of Life or Fire Within. We'll talk about these things combined here. So what the Renewing Blaze is, this is a red spell defensive. 1.5 minute cooldown. So the Flames of Life surround you for X amount of time. While this effect is active, 100% of the damage you take is healed back over 8 seconds. This is really, really good when, you know, you're just about to take damage, you hit this, and then you heal yourself back up. Now, Fire Within reduces this down to a 1 minute cooldown instead of 1.5 minutes, and Foci of Life, Renewing Blaze, restores you more quickly, causing the damage you take to be healed back over 4 seconds instead of 8. So you can choose to have it more consistently or a lot more powerfully, which is really, really nice. Is that the way to say it? That's what we'll go with. Zephyr, 2 minute cooldown. You conjure an updraft to lift you and your 4 nearest allies within 20 yards, so an entire dungeon run, a dungeon group, into the air, reducing damage from all area of effect attacks by 20% and increasing movement by 30% for X amount of time. This is an incredibly powerful ability when properly utilized in, you know, for example, if we look at Neltharis, when he's beating on the blacksmith and everyone's taking big AoE damage, bam, Zephyr, you can use this as a DPS cooldown, move around a little bit better. If maybe your group just needs to all move around a little bit quicker. Zephyr, there's a lot of different uses for this, which is really kind of unique to, you know, this class. And lastly, we're going to talk about Time Spiral. So, Time Spiral is a bronze spell which you bend time, allowing you and your allies within 40 yards to cast their major ability once in the next X amount of time, even if it's on cooldown. So sometimes if you're playing a different spec and you're playing with an Evoker, let's say you're on your warrior and your heroic leap for some odd reason is shining. You're like, wait, what? I just used this. There was 15 seconds left on this. Like, what? Time Spiral, baby. When utilized properly, Evoker has an absolute boatload of unique utility that you can use in dungeons, in raid, and to be all around insanely powerful and be a great spec. Now, right now, Devastation is definitely on the meta side of things in terms of damage, but my goodness, do you bring a lot of answers to a lot of scenarios that other specs just can't, and that's one of the reasons why I've been falling in love with this spec. And as you can see, I think this video is going to end up being about 25 minutes long, and we haven't even talked about class trees yet, which we will be doing in separate videos using this as a basis guideline of. Now, of course, things may change. This is currently how it is on the PTR. They are making changes to Augment Evoker, and they have made a few changes to the class tree, but they've been fairly minor, so I'm a lot more confident in coming in with a guide on the class tree right now, where the Augmentation Evoker side of things, I kind of want to wait to see how things play out. But that is kind of the base guide to the class tree as well. Like I said, we're not going to be going over stats or anything that's more spec dependent. On how all of those things, play out. Like, I know Devastation really, really likes Mastery. Augmentation is really looking forward to Mastery seeming to be their best at as well. Preservation really likes Mastery for their healing, but for their damage portion of their kits, they want a little bit more crit and things like that, a little bit more haste. So it kind of all depends how to play out now. That is a very quick summarization of me talking about stats, so please don't take that as, oh, he explained everything. Not quite the same thing. But that is Evoker. And you bring so much to a party that is really fun and really unique and can make dungeon runs go incredibly smooth and fast and help your healer and help your tank and help your party members move around and just bring a lot to it. Not to mention you have Bloodlust with Fury of the Aspects, right? You bring so much to a party that it's actually crazy. But that is the beginner's guide to Evoker. What do you guys think? Are you guys excited for Augmentation? I would love to hear what you guys think. Have yourself a good one, everyone. Happy tanking. Bye.